The dust storm raged across the Colorado plains as Madeline Cooper clutched her threadbare shawl against the biting wind, each step away from her family's ranch feeling like both freedom and exile. Her swollen right eye and the bruises on her wrists told the story that her trembling lips couldn't speak the price of defiance in the Clayton household. It was 1878, and Animas Forks, Colorado was experiencing one of the driest summers on record. The once prosperous silver mining town still bustled with activity, but Madeline had never felt more alone. At 20 years old, she had committed the unforgivable sin of refusing to marry Harold Blackwell, the 45-year-old banker who held her father's mounting debts in his ledger. "You'll marry him, or you're no daughter of mine," her father had roared just hours earlier, his weathered face twisted with rage as her mother sobbed quietly in the corner. "I didn't raise you to be selfish, Madeline," but Madeline knew what happened to young women who married Harold. His previous 2 wives had both perished under mysterious circumstances, leaving him wealthier each time. When she had voiced these concerns, her father's hand had struck her face with such force that she'd fallen against the kitchen table. Now, miles from home with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small bundle containing a photograph of her late grandmother and a few precious keepsakes, Madeline walked without destination. The sun was beginning to set, painting the western sky in brilliant oranges and reds that seemed to mock her desperate situation. Her left boot had developed a split in the sole, and each step sent painful reminders of her predicament shooting up her leg. Water, she needed water soon. The canteen she'd hastily filled before fleeing was already empty, and her throat felt like sandpaper. The sound of hoofbeats made her tense. Travelers on this road could mean danger for a woman alone. She quickened her pace, veering toward a stand of cottonwoods that might offer some concealment. "Whoa there, Tempest," a deep voice called out, and the hoofbeats slowed. Madeline didn't turn around. She kept walking, her heart hammering against her ribs. Miss, are you all right?" The voice was closer now, concerned rather than threatening, but Madeline had learned that a man's gentle voice could hide cruel intentions. "I'm fine, sir," she managed, her voice cracking from thirst and emotion. "Please continue on your way." The rider guided his horse alongside her, keeping a respectful distance. He was tall in the saddle, silhouetted against the setting sun. A worn leather hat sat atop his head, and a bandana was pulled up over his nose and mouth against the dust. "Begging your pardon, but you don't look fine," he said, pulling down the bandana to reveal a face younger than she'd expected, perhaps 25, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' growth of beard. His eyes were kind but concerned. "You're bleeding." Madeline touched her temple, surprised to find her fingers came away red. She hadn't even noticed. "It's nothing," she said, pride making her straighten despite the exhaustion threatening to collapse her legs beneath her. The man dismounted in one fluid movement, his spurs jangling softly as his boots hit the ground. He kept his distance, seeming to understand her wariness. "Name's Zachary Lawson," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "I run cattle about 20 miles west of here." "And you look like you could use some help, miss." "Cooper," she replied cautiously. "Madeline Cooper." Zachary nodded, his eyes taking in her bruised face, torn dress, and the small bundle clutched in her white-knuckled grip. To his credit, he asked no questions about her condition. "Miss Cooper, night's coming fast, and this road ain't safe after dark. I'd be honored to offer you my horse." Madeline stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. "Why would you help me? You don't know anything about me." A small smile touched the corners of his mouth, revealing a slight dimple in his right cheek. "My ma taught me that helping folks in need isn't about knowing their story. It's about doing what's right." He gestured to his horse, a beautiful chestnut mare with intelligent eyes. "Tempest here is gentle as they come. I can walk alongside to wherever you're headed." The absurdity of the situation struck Madeline suddenly. She had nowhere to go. Her aunt lived in Denver, but that was over 300 miles away, an impossible journey on foot. Her friends in town would be too afraid of her father's wrath to take her in. "I don't," she began, but dizziness overtook her and she swayed on her feet. In an instant, Zachary was beside her, his strong hand steadying her without being presumptuous. "Easy now," he murmured. The world spun, and Madeline felt her knees buckle. The last thing she remembered was the surprised concern in Zachary Lawson's green eyes as he caught her falling form. When Madeline awoke, she was lying on a bedroll beside a small campfire. The night had fallen completely, and stars punctured the vast Colorado sky like tiny pinpricks in black velvet. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, followed swiftly by panic. "You're safe," came Zachary's voice from across the fire. He sat on a log, whittling a piece of wood with a small knife. "You fainted from exhaustion, I reckon. Hope you don't mind, but I made camp. Didn't seem right to move you far." Madeline sat up slowly, relieved to find her clothing undisturbed and her bundle placed carefully beside her. A canteen rested nearby and she reached for it gratefully. "Small sips," Zachary advised. "Too much at once will make you sick." She followed his instructions, the cool water soothing her parched throat. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice stronger. "There's some beans and bacon keeping warm by the fire if you're hungry." Her stomach growled in response, and Zachary chuckled, passing her a tin plate. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the crackling fire and the occasional whinny from Tempest, who was hobbled nearby. "I don't mean to pry," Zachary said eventually, setting his empty plate aside, "but a woman walking alone on that road in your condition, it suggests trouble of a serious nature." Madeline stared into the flames, debating how much to reveal. This man had shown her nothing but kindness, yet she had learned early that kindness often came with expectations. "My father wanted me to marry a man," she said finally. "A wealthy man who could solve his financial problems. I refused." Zachary nodded slowly. "And he took his disappointment out on you." She touched her bruised cheek unconsciously. "He said if I wouldn't do my duty as his daughter, then I was no daughter of his. He told me not to come back." "I'm sorry," Zachary said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made tears prick at Madeline's eyes. She blinked them away rapidly. "What will you do now?" he asked after a respectful pause. "I have an aunt in Denver," Madeline replied, though even as she said it, she knew the journey would be nearly impossible alone. "I thought I might find work in one of the mining towns along the way." Zachary's expression grew troubled. "Mining towns are no place for a woman alone, Miss Cooper." "The work available to you would be." He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm aware of the limited options for women," she said stiffly, "but I have some education. I can read and write. Perhaps I could find work as a teacher or a shop assistant." "Perhaps," he agreed, though he didn't sound convinced. He seemed to be considering something, weighing options in his mind. Finally, he said, "My ranch isn't much, just a small spread I've been building up these past 3 years. But I have a cabin, and my sister Martha lives there too. She's been wanting help with the household and the vegetable garden." Madeline's guard went up immediately. "Mr. Lawson, if you're suggesting," he held up his hands quickly. "Nothing improper, Miss Cooper. You'd have your own room. Martha's there as chaperone. It would just be until you decide what you want to do or save enough to continue to Denver. Honest work for fair pay." She studied him across the fire, this cowboy who had stopped to help a stranger on the road. His face was open, his expression earnest. Still, she had learned caution. "Why would you offer this to someone you don't know?" Zachary poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "3 years ago, I was robbed on my way to buy my land, left for dead in a gully. An old Apache man found me, tended my wounds, gave me shelter until I could travel again. Never asked for anything in return." He looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "He told me that the true measure of a person is how they treat those who can offer them nothing." The sincerity in his words touched something in Madeline, a small spark of hope she thought had been extinguished. Still, wariness kept her from accepting immediately. "I'll ride with you to your ranch tomorrow," she said finally. "If your sister is amenable, perhaps I'll stay a few days while I consider my options." Relief washed over Zachary's features. "That's fair," he agreed. "We're about half a day's ride west. Martha will be glad for the company. It gets lonely out there sometimes." As Madeline settled back onto the bedroll, pulling the blanket Zachary had provided around her shoulders, she wondered if she was making a terrible mistake trusting this stranger. But as sleep claimed her, she realized that for the first time since leaving her family's home, she felt something close to safe. The morning dawned clear and bright. The previous day's dust settled by a light overnight rain that left everything smelling fresh and new. Madeline woke to find Zachary already up, tending to Tempest and preparing a simple breakfast of coffee and johnnycakes. "You're an early riser, Mr. Lawson," she observed, running her fingers through her tangled auburn hair in a futile attempt to make herself presentable. "Habit from ranch life," he replied, handing her a tin cup of strong coffee. "And please call me Zachary. Mr. Lawson was my father." Madeline accepted the coffee gratefully, though she hesitated at the familiarity he suggested. "Then I suppose you should call me Madeline," she conceded after a moment. They ate quickly, and soon Zachary was saddling Tempest. "I'll help you up," he offered, "and I'll walk alongside. It's not too far." Madeline felt guilty. "I can't take your horse while you walk." "Tempest can carry us both for short stretches," Zachary suggested, "but it's tough on her in this heat for too long. We'll trade off walking." The arrangement worked well, and as they traveled, Zachary pointed out landmarks and told stories about the area. He had a good sense of humor and an easy way of talking that gradually put Madeline at ease. When they stopped for a brief rest near a small stream, she found herself sharing more about her life before her father's ultimatum. "I always loved books," she admitted, watching as Tempest drank from the clear water. "My grandmother taught me to read when I was very young. She believed girls should be educated just as thoroughly as boys." Zachary nodded approvingly. "Sounds like a wise woman." "My sister Martha's the same way, always got her nose in a book. She orders them special from Denver." "What made you become a rancher?" Madeline asked, curious about this man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. Zachary squinted at the horizon, thoughtful. "Freedom, I suppose. My pa worked in the mines his whole life, coming home coughing up black dust and bowing to the whims of the mine owners. I wanted open air and to answer to no one but myself and the land." He smiled slightly. "Though the cattle have their own ideas sometimes." By midday, they crested a small rise and Zachary pointed ahead. "There it is, Lawson Ranch." It was modest compared to some of the spreads Madeline had seen, but there was something welcoming about it. A small cabin with a covered porch sat nestled against a backdrop of pine trees. A sturdy barn and corral housed several horses, and in the distance, cattle grazed on rolling grassland. Smoke curled from the cabin's chimney, suggesting someone was home. As they approached, the cabin door swung open and a young woman stepped out, shading her eyes against the sun. She was slightly shorter than Madeline, with the same dark hair as Zachary but cut practically at shoulder length. Zach, you're back early, and you've brought company, she called out, her voice carrying across the yard. Martha, this is Madeline Cooper, Zachary called back as they drew closer. She's had some trouble and needs a place to stay for a while. Martha Lawson hurried down the porch steps, her shrewd eyes taking in Madeline's bruised face and disheveled appearance. To her credit, her welcoming smile never faltered. Miss Cooper, you're most welcome, she said warmly, reaching out to take Madeline's hand as Zachary helped her down from Tempest. Come inside out of this heat. You look like you could use a cool drink and maybe a wash. The simple kindness in Martha's voice almost undid Madeline's composure. She managed a grateful nod, suddenly overcome with emotion. The interior of the cabin was simple but clean and orderly. A main room served as kitchen and living area, with a solid table, a few chairs, and a small bookshelf packed with volumes. 2 doors led off to what Madeline presumed were bedrooms. Zach told me a little of your situation, Martha said, as she poured cool water from a pitcher. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. The second bedroom is small, but it's private. Madeline sipped the water, overwhelmed by the siblings' generosity. I don't want to be a burden, she began. Nonsense, Martha interrupted firmly. I've been telling Zach for months I need help around here. I manage the household and the accounts, grow vegetables and preserve food for winter, all while he's out with the cattle. Another pair of hands would be a blessing. She smiled warmly. Besides, I've been desperate for female company. Zachary, who had been standing somewhat awkwardly by the door, cleared his throat. Well, I'll leave you ladies to get acquainted. I need to check on the herd. He tipped his hat to Madeline. Rest well, Madeline. Martha will take good care of you. After he left, Martha showed Madeline to the small bedroom. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a chest for clothing, and a small bedside table with a lamp. A window looked out over the grasslands to the west, where the afternoon sun was beginning to sink. It's not much, Martha apologized, but it's clean. It's perfect, Madeline whispered, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. The kindness of these strangers was more than she had dared to hope for. Martha squeezed her shoulder gently. I've put water on to heat for a bath. And I think I have a dress that might fit you, though you're taller than me. After Martha left, Madeline sank onto the bed, her hands trembling as the events of the past 24 hours caught up with her. Tears she had held back for too long finally spilled over, not just from grief at her family's betrayal, but also from relief at finding safe harbor when she had expected none. Later, cleaned and dressed in a borrowed blue calico dress that was indeed a bit short at the ankles, Madeline sat at the kitchen table while Martha prepared a simple but hearty supper of rabbit stew and biscuits. How long have you and your brother lived here? Madeline asked, helping to shell peas from Martha's garden. About 3 years now, Martha replied, stirring the stew pot. Our parents died within months of each other, pa from the mine dust in his lungs, ma from grief, I think. Zach had been saving to buy land, and after they passed, there was nothing keeping us in the mining camp. She glanced out the window toward the pastures. He works so hard. This place means everything to him. He seems like a good man, Madeline ventured cautiously. Martha's smile was warm and genuine. The best. Stubborn as a mule sometimes, but with a heart bigger than Colorado. Never thought he'd find a wife out here, though eligible women are scarce, and he's too honorable to frequent the kinds of establishments where he might meet someone. She gave Madeline a pointed look. Oh, I'm not, Madeline began, flustered. That is, I'm only planning to stay temporarily. Martha laughed, the sound light and carefree. I'm just teasing you, though I wouldn't mind a sister-in-law eventually. Her expression grew more serious. Zach told me a little about how he found you. Your father sounds like a brute, if you don't mind my saying so. Madeline focused on the peas, uncomfortable with the subject. He wasn't always. After my mother died giving birth to my brother who didn't survive either, something in him changed. The drought these past 2 years and the falling prices for our cattle made it worse. Martha reached across the table and squeezed Madeline's hand. Families should protect each other, not use each other as bargaining chips. You were brave to leave. Zachary returned as the sun was setting, bringing with him the scent of open air and horses. He washed up at the basin on the porch before joining them at the table, and Madeline couldn't help noticing how his still damp hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Dinner conversation flowed easily, with Martha doing most of the talking. She was naturally gregarious, filling the silence with stories about their neighbors and the small community that gathered occasionally at a nearby settlement for social events. Mrs. Abernathy is organizing a harvest dance in a few weeks, she mentioned, passing the biscuits to Zachary. You should come with us, Madeline. It would be a chance to meet people. I don't know if I'll still be here, Madeline replied, though the thought of returning to solitary travel filled her with dread. Well, you're welcome as long as you want to stay, Zachary said quietly, his eyes meeting hers briefly before returning to his plate. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie night, Madeline tried to make sense of her situation. The Lawson siblings' kindness seemed genuine, but experience had taught her that kindness often had limits. How long before they tired of her presence? Before they expected something in return? Yet, despite her misgivings, she fell asleep more peacefully than she had in months, lulled by the distant sound of a coyote's cry and the gentle whisper of wind through the pines outside her window. Days at the Lawson ranch fell into a comfortable rhythm. Madeline helped Martha with household chores in the mornings, cooking, cleaning, tending to the vegetable garden that provided much of their food. In the afternoons, she often assisted with mending, preserving food, or caring for the chickens that provided eggs and occasional meat. Zachary was often absent during daylight hours, tending to the cattle, repairing fences, or handling the myriad other tasks required to maintain the ranch. But he always returned for supper, and those evening meals became something Madeline found herself looking forward to with increasing anticipation. A week passed, then two. Her bruises faded and color returned to her cheeks. The nightmares that had plagued her first few nights, dreams of her father's rage or Harold Blackwell's cold, calculating eyes, gradually subsided. One afternoon, while hanging laundry with Martha, Madeline spotted Zachary in the distance, riding hard toward the cabin. Something about his posture set alarm bells ringing. "Martha," she called, pointing. "Something's wrong." Martha shaded her eyes, then dropped the wet shirt she was holding. "That's not Tempest he's riding. That's Diablo. He only takes him out when there's trouble." They hurried to meet Zachary as he dismounted in a cloud of dust, his expression grim. "Rustlers," he said tersely. "They've taken at least 20 head from the north pasture. I found where they cut the fence." Martha's hand flew to her mouth. "Did you see them?" "Just tracks heading east toward Broken Arrow Canyon. Pete Simmons from the next ranch over is already gathering men to go after them." He turned to go back to the barn, then hesitated, glancing at Madeline. "I'll be gone overnight, maybe longer." "Be careful," Madeline said softly, surprising herself with the depth of concern she felt. Something shifted in Zachary's expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight quirk of his lips. "I will," he promised. "Martha knows where the rifle is if you need it." After he galloped away, Martha touched Madeline's arm gently. "He'll be all right. This isn't the first time we've dealt with rustlers." "Does it happen often?" Madeline asked, her heart still racing with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. "Often enough." Some men think stealing cattle is easier than raising them. Martha sighed, looking in the direction Zachary had disappeared. It's hard, this life, but it's ours. That night, the cabin felt emptier without Zachary's presence. Martha tried to maintain conversation during supper, but worry made both women distracted. They retired early, but Madeline found sleep elusive. Around midnight, a sound outside made her bolt upright in bed. Footsteps on the porch, heavy, stumbling. Not Zachary's usual confident stride. She slipped from bed, grabbing the heavy iron poker from beside the small fireplace in her room. In the main room, she found Martha already up, the rifle in her hands. "Who's there?" Martha called through the door. "It's me," came Zachary's voice, strained with pain. "I'm hurt, Martha." They rushed to open the door. Zachary half fell into the cabin, blood darkening the left side of his shirt. Martha helped him to a chair while Madeline quickly lit more lamps. "What happened?" Martha demanded, already ripping his shirt to examine the wound. "Ambush," Zachary grunted, wincing as Martha probed the injury. "They were waiting for us in the canyon. Pete took a bullet in the shoulder. I got this." "Knife wound," Martha determined, relief evident in her voice. "Deep, but missed anything vital from the looks of it." "Madeline, get my medicine box from my room and put water on to boil." Working together, they cleaned and stitched the wound, a 6-inch gash along Zachary's ribs. He remained stoic throughout, though beads of sweat gathered on his forehead from the pain. "The rustlers?" Martha asked as she tied off the last stitch. "Got away. For now." Zachary's voice was tight. "But we identified 2 of them, the Harker brothers. Sheriff will be looking for them." He tried to stand but swayed dangerously. "You're not going anywhere," Madeline said firmly, surprising herself with her authoritative tone. "You've lost blood and need rest." Zachary looked like he might argue, but the combined stern expressions of both women silenced him. "Just for tonight," he conceded. They helped him to his bedroom, where he collapsed onto the bed with a barely suppressed groan. Madeline brought him water and the laudanum Martha had retrieved from her medical supplies. "Take it," she insisted when he tried to refuse. "You need sleep to heal." After he reluctantly swallowed the bitter medicine, Madeline found herself lingering by his bedside, adjusting the blanket unnecessarily. "Thank you," Zachary murmured, his eyes already growing heavy from the laudanum. "For helping." "Rest now," she replied softly, fighting the urge to smooth the hair from his forehead. "I'll check on you later." In the kitchen, Martha was cleaning up the bloody rags and medical supplies. She looked up when Madeline entered. "He's stubborn about taking medicine. Thank you for convincing him." "Will he really be all right?" Madeline asked, helping to put away the supplies. Martha nodded. "The wound's clean and he's strong, but he'll need to take it easy for a few days, which will be the real challenge." She studied Madeline with knowing eyes. "You care for him?" It wasn't a question, and Madeline felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He's been kind to me. You both have." "It's more than gratitude I see in your eyes when you look at him," Martha said gently, "and more than kindness in his when he looks at you." Madeline busied herself with wiping down the table, unsure how to respond. Her feelings for Zachary had grown complicated over the weeks she'd spent at the ranch. What had started as gratitude had developed into admiration, and lately, something deeper she was afraid to name. "I won't pry," Martha said after a moment, "but I will say this: Zachary deserves happiness, and so do you, Madeline." The following days were devoted to Zachary's recovery. Though he chafed at the inactivity, the pain of his wound kept him largely confined to the cabin. Madeline found herself taking on new responsibilities, riding out with Martha to check on the nearby cattle, helping with tasks Zachary would normally handle around the ranch. To keep him from going stir-crazy, Madeline began reading aloud in the evenings from Martha's collection of books. She discovered that Zachary had a sharp mind and thoughtful opinions about everything from politics to poetry, though he downplayed his intelligence with self-deprecating humor. "My schooling ended early," he admitted one evening as Madeline closed a volume of Whitman's poems. "But I've always loved learning. Martha's the same, probably why she became a teacher before coming out here." "You were a teacher?" Madeline asked Martha, surprised. "For 3 years in a mining camp school," Martha confirmed. "I miss it sometimes. There are no children nearby enough for a school here." An idea began to form in Madeline's mind, but she kept it to herself for the moment, turning instead to check Zachary's bandages, as had become her evening routine. As she carefully removed the dressing, she was keenly aware of his eyes on her face, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. The wound was healing well, the angry red beginning to fade to pink. "You have a gentle touch," Zachary murmured as her fingers brushed his skin. "My grandmother taught me basic nursing," she replied, focusing on reapplying the clean bandage to hide her flushing cheeks. "She believed women should know how to care for injuries." "Your grandmother sounds like she was ahead of her time." "She was. I wish you could have met her." The words slipped out before Madeline could consider their implication that she imagined Zachary as part of a future that included introducing him to her family. If he noticed the significance, he didn't comment on it. Instead, he captured her hand as she finished with the bandage. "Thank you, Madeline, for everything." The warmth of his calloused palm around her fingers sent a pleasant shiver up her arm. "You saved me first," she reminded him. "I'm just returning the favor." "Is that all it is?" he asked, his voice dropping lower. "A favor returned." The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. Before Madeline could formulate a response, Martha entered the room with a fresh pot of coffee, and the moment dissolved, though the memory of his touch lingered on her skin. That night, unable to sleep, Madeline slipped outside to sit on the porch steps. The moon hung full and bright above the prairie, casting everything in silvery light. The vastness of the land both awed and comforted her out here. Her father's reach seemed insignificant, Harold Blackwell's influence meaningless. For the first time since leaving home, Madeline allowed herself to truly contemplate a future. Not just surviving day to day, but building something meaningful. The thought both exhilarated and terrified her. The soft creak of the door behind her interrupted her reverie. Zachary eased himself down beside her on the step, moving carefully to avoid straining his injury. "You should be resting," she chided gently. "Couldn't sleep," he replied, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. "Too many thoughts." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, the night sounds of the prairie creating a soothing backdrop. "I've been thinking," Madeline finally said, gathering her courage, "about staying. Permanently." She felt rather than saw Zachary's surprise, a slight tensing of his body beside her. "Martha mentioned she was a teacher," Madeline continued, the words coming faster now. "There are several families within riding distance who have children. Perhaps we could start a small school, maybe just 2 or 3 days a week to start. I could help her teach." "You want to stay?" Zachary's voice was carefully neutral. Madeline turned to face him, finding his eyes already on her, searching her face in the moonlight. "I do, if you and Martha are amenable." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features. "Madeline, nothing would make me happier." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "But I want to be clear, I'm not offering charity or just employment. These weeks with you here, I've come to care for you deeply." The confession, simple and direct, made her heart soar. "I care for you too, Zachary, more than I thought possible in such a short time." He shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek tenderly. "I'm not a wealthy man and this life isn't easy, but if you stayed, if you would consider building a life here, with me." "Are you asking me to court you, Zachary Lawson?" Madeline whispered, leaning slightly into his touch. His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone with reverent care. "I'm asking for the chance to prove myself worthy of your affection, to show you that not all men are like your father or the man he tried to force you to marry." In response, Madeline closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was both an answer and a beginning. His arms encircled her gently, mindful of his healing wound, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened into something that spoke of promises and possibilities. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you Martha will be insufferably smug about this. She's been dropping hints since the day you arrived." Madeline laughed softly. "She's not very subtle." "No subtlety in the Lawson family," he agreed with a chuckle. "We tend to speak our minds and feel with our whole hearts." "I like that about you," Madeline said, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "After a lifetime of hidden agendas and unspoken expectations, your honesty is refreshing." They stayed on the porch until the moon began its descent, talking of their pasts and dreaming of a shared future, punctuating the conversation with gentle kisses and tender touches that held the promise of deeper passion to come. When Madeline finally returned to her bed, she fell asleep with a smile on her lips and hope blooming in her heart like a desert flower after the first spring rain. The following weeks brought dramatic changes to Lawson Ranch. As Zachary recovered his strength, he and Madeline spent every available moment together, working side by side during the day and discovering each other's hearts in quiet evening conversations. Martha, as predicted, was delighted by their courtship. She threw herself enthusiastically into their plan for a small school, riding out to neighboring ranches to speak with families about sending their children for lessons 2 days a week. 5 families have agreed to participate, she announced excitedly one evening in late August. That's 12 children altogether, ages 6 to 14. They'll ride in on Monday and Tuesday mornings, with the older ones escorting the younger ones. "We'll need to convert the barn loft into a classroom," Zachary mused, his arm comfortably around Madeline's shoulders as they sat together on the porch bench. "Add some windows for better light, build some simple desks." Madeline leaned into his embrace, still marveling at how natural it felt to be close to him. "I can teach reading and writing to the younger ones while Martha handles the more advanced subjects. And we can ask for payment in goods as well as money," Martha added. "Fresh meat, preserves, help with harvest things we need around here." The enthusiasm in Martha's voice made Madeline smile. Her new friend had confessed to feeling increasingly isolated on the ranch, missing the intellectual stimulation of teaching. This arrangement would benefit everyone involved. As summer gave way to autumn, the transformation of the ranch continued. Zachary, fully healed and with renewed energy, built a proper classroom in the barn loft, complete with a small wood stove for the coming winter months. Madeline and Martha sewed curtains for the new windows and collected books, slates, and other school supplies on a trip to the nearest town. Word spread about the new school, and 2 more families asked to participate, bringing their student count to 16. It was a modest beginning, but Madeline felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. Her relationship with Zachary deepened with each passing day. Their courtship, conducted under Martha's watchful but approving eye, progressed from stolen kisses to serious discussions of marriage. Zachary was patient, never pushing for more than Madeline was ready to give, but his devotion was evident in every look, every touch. On a crisp October evening, as they walked hand in hand along the creek that bordered the eastern edge of the ranch, Zachary stopped beneath a golden-leaved cottonwood tree and turned to face her. "Madeline Cooper," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. When I found you on that road, I never imagined you would become so essential to my existence." He took both her hands in his green eyes intense with sincerity. "I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything. I love you, Madeline, with all that I am. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Though she had anticipated this moment, the reality of it, the raw emotion in Zachary's voice, the love shining in his eyes overwhelmed her. Tears spilled down her cheeks as joy welled up inside her. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Zachary. I love you too, and I would be proud to be your wife." He lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace, spinning her around as laughter bubbled up between them. When he set her down, he withdrew a small object from his pocket, a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "Martha's been keeping it safe for me, waiting for the right woman to wear it." The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Madeline marveled at it, then at the man before her who had so completely transformed her life. She pulled him close for a kiss that sealed their promise to each other, her heart so full she thought it might burst from happiness. When they returned to the cabin, Martha was waiting, barely containing her excitement. She burst into happy tears at their news, embracing them both fiercely. "I knew from the moment Zach brought you home that you belonged here," she told Madeline. "Welcome to the family, sister." They celebrated with the special bottle of wine Martha had been saving for an important occasion, toasting to the future and making plans for a simple wedding before winter set in fully. Later that night, as Madeline prepared for bed, she caught her reflection in the small mirror above her washbasin. The woman who looked back at her bore little resemblance to the frightened, bruised girl who had fled her father's house months before. This Madeline stood straight and confident, her eyes bright with purpose and love, her future stretching before her like an open road. She touched her mother's locket that still hung around her neck, thinking of all she had lost and all she had gained. "I hope you would be proud, Mama," she whispered to the empty room. "I've found where I belong." News of their engagement spread quickly through the scattered community. Most reactions were positive. The neighbors had come to know and respect Madeline through the school and various social gatherings. A few raised eyebrows at the relatively short courtship, but Martha deftly deflected gossip with her matter-of-fact defense of her brother's choice. Preparations for the wedding occupied much of their free time. The ceremony would be small but meaningful, held at the ranch with the local circuit preacher officiating. Martha worked with Madeline to alter her mother's wedding dress, which she had carefully preserved all these years. "She would have loved you," Martha assured Madeline as they pinned the delicate lace along the bodice. "You have her strength and her kindness." 2 weeks before the wedding, as Madeline was returning from teaching at their small school, she spotted an unfamiliar wagon approaching the ranch house. A chill ran down her spine at the sight of the 2 men on the seat, her father and Harold Blackwell. She urged her horse forward, determined to intercept them before they reached the house where Zachary was repairing the roof. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she circled around to block their path. "That's far enough," she called out, surprised at the steadiness in her voice despite her inner turmoil. Her father pulled the wagon to a halt, his weather-beaten face hardening at the sight of her. "So this is where you've been hiding," he spat. "Do you have any idea of the trouble you've caused, girl?" Madeline sat tall in her saddle, no longer the cowed daughter who had fled in fear. "I'm not hiding, Father. I've made a new life for myself. A life." Harold Blackwell sneered, his cold eyes assessing the ranch buildings with contempt. "Playing house with some dirt-poor rancher while your family suffers. My family cast me out, Madeline reminded them, anger replacing her initial fear. You told me not to come back unless I agreed to marry this man. I refused then, and I refuse now. You'll return with us today, her father declared, standing up in the wagon. I've signed papers with Mr. Blackwell. The arrangements are made. I'm 20 years old, father. You cannot sign papers for me or arrange my future without my consent. Madeline held up her left hand, the pearl ring catching the sunlight. And I'm engaged to be married to Zachary Lawson, a man of honor and kindness. Her father's face flushed with rage. That ring isn't legal binding. You're coming home. Is there a problem here? Zachary's voice came from behind Madeline. He rode up beside her on Tempest, his expression calm but his eyes hard as he assessed the situation. This doesn't concern you, boy, Harold Blackwell said dismissively. This is family business. Madeline is my family now, Zachary replied evenly, reaching over to take her hand. Or we'll be in 2 weeks' time when we're married. So yes, it does concern me. Madeline's father climbed down from the wagon, his hand moving ominously toward his belt where she knew he kept a small pistol. You've stolen my daughter. No one stole me, Madeline interjected firmly. I left of my own accord after you struck me and told me I was no longer your daughter. She softened her voice slightly, seeing the shadows of grief and desperation behind her father's anger. I'm sorry for the financial troubles you're facing, truly. But selling me into marriage with a man known to mistreat his wives is not the solution. Harold Blackwell's face contorted with indignation. How dare you spread such slander? My wives died of natural causes. Did they? Martha's voice joined the confrontation as she approached on foot, a shotgun held casually but visibly in her arms. Because folks in town tell a different story. Seems the sheriff in Denver has been asking questions about those natural causes for some time now. A flash of alarm crossed Blackwell's face before he masked it with disdain. Preposterous. Is it? Martha continued pleasantly, coming to stand beside Madeline's horse. I wrote to my friend who teaches school in Denver. She says there's quite a lot of interest in reopening the investigation into your second wife's death. Something about unusual bruising discovered by the undertaker. The color drained from Blackwell's face. He turned to Madeline's father. Cooper, control your daughter and let's be on our way. This is a waste of time. But Madeline's father was looking at her now, really seeing her for the first time since her mother's death. The confident young woman before him on horseback, backed by people who clearly cared for her, was a far cry from the frightened girl he had driven from his home. You're truly happy here? He asked, his voice gruff but the rage subsiding. I am, father, Madeline answered honestly. Happier than I've been in years. I'm teaching children to read and write. I'm respected here. And I love Zachary with all my heart. Something shifted in her father's expression, a crumbling of the hard shell he had built around himself since becoming a widower. Your mother would be pleased, he said quietly. She always wanted you to marry for love, not convenience. Blackwell grabbed her father's arm. This is absurd, Cooper. We had an agreement. An agreement I'm now voiding, her father replied, shaking off Blackwell's grip. My daughter is not for sale, never should have been. He looked back at Madeline, regret evident in the slump of his shoulders. I've been a poor excuse for a father since your mother died. The drought and debts, they're no excuse for how I treated you. Madeline felt tears threatening. Despite everything, this man was still her father. Perhaps we can find another way to help with the ranch, she suggested. Zachary knows cattle. Maybe there's a solution that doesn't involve selling your land. Zachary, ever perceptive, nodded in agreement. I've had some success with new breeding methods that improve drought resistance in the herds. I'd be willing to share what I've learned. Harold Blackwell's face darkened with fury. "This is outrageous. I'll not be made a fool of." He reached inside his coat, pulling out a revolver with startling speed. Before he could aim properly, Martha's shotgun was leveled at his chest. "I wouldn't," she advised calmly. "I was county sharpshooting champion 3 years running before I moved out here." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Blackwell lowered his weapon. "This isn't finished," he growled. "The debt still stands, Cooper." "I'll find another way," Madeline's father replied firmly. "Now get off my daughter's property." The word daughter, spoken with a hint of pride rather than possession, brought fresh tears to Madeline's eyes. After Blackwell had climbed back into the wagon and driven away in a cloud of dust, Madeline's father remained, looking uncertain and much older than his 50 years. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said after an awkward silence. "What I did, striking you, threatening you, there's no excuse." Madeline dismounted, handing the reins to Zachary. She approached her father cautiously, still wary but willing to listen. "It will take time," she acknowledged, "but we're family. If you're truly sorry, perhaps we can begin again." She glanced at Zachary, drawing strength from his supportive nod. "Would you like to come inside, meet my new family properly? Maybe stay for supper?" The relief and gratitude in her father's eyes spoke volumes. "I'd be honored," he said simply. That evening, around the Lawsons' kitchen table, tentative bridges were built. Madeline's father, John Cooper, shared stories of her mother that Madeline had never heard, how they had met at a harvest dance, how she had taught him to read better by candlelight after long days working the land. "She had your spirit," he told Madeline, a sad smile touching his weathered face. "I forgot that for a while, tried to break it instead of nurture it. I'm sorry for that." "What will you do about the ranch, about Blackwell?" Zachary asked, practical concerns tempering the emotional reunion. John sighed heavily. "The debts are real enough. Bad investments, poor harvests. Blackwell holds most of the notes now." "There might be a solution," Martha suggested thoughtfully. "The school we've started is growing. We're considering building a proper schoolhouse come spring. The land just south of your property would be perfect, close enough for children from several ranches to attend." "Are you suggesting I sell part of my land for a school?" John asked, considering the idea. "For a fair price," Zachary confirmed. "And we could help you implement some of the breeding and grazing techniques I've developed. Might turn things around for the remaining acreage." For the first time in years, Madeline saw genuine hope in her father's eyes. "I'd be a fool not to consider it," he admitted. As the conversation continued into the evening, plans taking shape and relationships being cautiously mended, Madeline felt a profound sense of coming full circle. The journey that had begun with her fleeing her father's house in fear was leading to a future where perhaps all the broken pieces might be made whole again, differently arranged, but stronger for having been broken and carefully reassembled. Later, as Zachary walked her father to the small guest cabin where he would spend the night, Madeline stood on the porch with Martha, watching the two men talking in the moonlight. "You have a generous heart," Martha observed, putting an arm around Madeline's shoulders. "Not many would offer reconciliation so readily." "It's not complete forgiveness yet," Madeline admitted, "but life is too short and too precious to cling to bitterness when there's a chance for healing." Martha squeezed her in a sideways hug. "That's why you belong here with us. That's why Zach loves you so much. You see possibilities where others see only problems." The wedding took place as planned 2 weeks later, a crisp November day with azure skies and golden leaves still clinging to the cottonwoods. John Cooper walked his daughter down the makeshift aisle, a path strewn with pine boughs and late-blooming wildflowers that led from the cabin to an arch Zachary had constructed beside the creek. Neighbors from miles around attended, along with the children from their school and their families. Even the sheriff from the nearest town came, bringing news that Harold Blackwell had left the territory suddenly, just ahead of investigators from Denver. Madeline wore Martha's mother's dress, altered to fit her taller frame, with a crown of autumn flowers in her auburn hair. Zachary, standing beneath the arch in his best clothes, watched her approach with such naked adoration that several of the women in attendance wiped away tears. The circuit preacher, an elderly man with kind eyes and a booming voice, performed a simple but heartfelt ceremony. When Zachary and Madeline exchanged their vows promises to love, honor, and cherish each other through all of life's challenges, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared. "Zachary, you may kiss your bride." Their kiss, tender yet passionate, sealed a journey that had begun with an act of kindness on a dusty road, and had blossomed into a love that promised to endure through whatever challenges lay ahead. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with music provided by neighbors who brought fiddles and harmonicas. Dancing on a wooden platform Zachary and the neighboring ranchers had built for the occasion, and enough food to feed everyone twice over. As the sun began to set, Madeline found a moment of quiet with her father, who had been watchful but respectful throughout the day. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I wish she could have seen this day." "I think she has," Madeline replied softly, squeezing his hand. "And I think she'd be proud of you too, for finding your way back to being the father she loved." The healing between them was still a work in progress, but it had begun in earnest. John Cooper had already agreed to sell a portion of his land for the new schoolhouse, and was staying an extra week to learn about Zachary's cattle-raising methods. Later, as the moon rose full and bright over the celebration, Zachary claimed his bride for a private moment behind the barn. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist as he pulled her close. "More than I ever dreamed possible, Mr. Lawson," she replied, her hands linking behind his neck, "though I'm still getting used to the name." "We have a lifetime for you to practice it," he murmured before claiming her lips in a kiss that promised much more to come later, when they would finally be alone as husband and wife. The party continued until the last guest departed, leaving the newlyweds to begin their life together in the small but warm cabin that had become Madeline's first true home. Martha had tactfully arranged to stay with a neighbor for a few days, giving them privacy to explore the intimate side of marriage that they had respectfully deferred until their wedding night. That night, as they discovered each other fully for the first time, their passion tempered by tenderness and deep love, Madeline marveled at how completely her life had transformed in the space of a few months. From desperate flight to profound belonging, from isolation to connection, from fear to love, the journey had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked later, as they lay entwined beneath the quilts, the chill November air making their cocoon of warmth all the more precious. "About that day on the road," she replied, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "How close I came to refusing your help. How different everything would be if I had." He captured her hand, bringing it to his lips to kiss her palm. "I like to think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be, Madeline, like us," she asked, smiling up at him in the dim light of the single lamp. "Exactly like us," he confirmed, gathering her closer. "The moment I saw you on that road, something inside me just knew. Even bruised and weary as you were, your spirit shone through. I think I started falling in love with you right then." "It took me a little longer," she admitted with a soft laugh. "I was too busy being suspicious of your kindness. And now, She shifted to look directly into his eyes, wanting him to see the absolute certainty in hers. "And now I know that loving you is the easiest, most natural thing I've ever done. It's like breathing, Zachary, essential and automatic." His kiss in response was both an acknowledgement and a promise of nights like this stretching into a shared future, of a love that would weather whatever challenges lay ahead. Spring arrived on the Lawson ranch with a riot of wildflowers and the birth of new calves in the expanded herd. The schoolhouse on the former Cooper land was nearly complete, a sturdy structure with large windows and space for up to 30 students. John Cooper had made peace with selling part of his ranch, especially since the remainder was now thriving under the new techniques Zachary had helped implement. He visited regularly, the relationship with his daughter healing more with each meeting. As for Madeline and Zachary, their first months of marriage had only deepened their connection. They worked side by side during the days teaching, ranching, building their shared dreams, and discovered new depths to their love each night. On a perfect May morning, as they sat on the porch watching the sunrise, Madeline took Zachary's hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "I have news," she said softly, her eyes shining. Understanding dawned in his expression, followed by wonder and joy so intense it took his breath away. "A baby," he whispered, as if speaking too loudly might dispel the miracle. She nodded, tears of happiness gathering in her eyes. "Due in early December, the doctor thinks." Zachary gathered her into his arms with a whoop of pure delight that startled the chickens in the nearby yard. "A baby," he repeated, louder this time. "Martha, Martha, come quick." His sister appeared at the door in her nightdress, alarmed. "What is it?" "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Zachary assured her, his face split by the widest grin Madeline had ever seen. "Everything's perfect. We're having a baby." Martha's squeal of excitement brought John Cooper running from the guest cabin where he was staying during his visit. The celebration that followed, impromptu and joyous, set the tone for the months to come. As summer ripened into autumn, Madeline's body changed to accommodate the new life growing within her. Zachary treated her with gentle reverence, marveling at each new development, talking to her rounded belly each night before they slept. Their school flourished, with 24 regular students and occasional adult education classes in the evenings. Martha had found unexpected romance with the widowed father of 2 of their students, a gentle-spoken rancher named Thomas Reed, who shared her love of literature and music. When December arrived with a light dusting of snow on the mountains surrounding their valley, Madeline felt ready. The nursery, a small room Zachary had added onto their cabin, was prepared with a handmade crib and rocking chair. Martha had sewn tiny garments and quilts. John Cooper had crafted a beautiful wooden chest for toys. The labor began on a cold, clear evening as the first stars appeared in the sky. Martha sent for the midwife who lived on a neighboring ranch, while Zachary paced anxiously, torn between staying by Madeline's side and obeying the midwife's instructions to wait outside. "Go," Madeline told him between contractions, squeezing his hand reassuringly. "Martha and Mrs. Benning will take good care of me. This is women's work for now." Reluctantly, he kissed her damp forehead and retreated to the porch, where John Cooper and Thomas Reed soon joined him with a bottle of whiskey and steadying words of encouragement. Inside, Madeline surrendered to the ancient rhythm of birth, finding strength she didn't know she possessed as her body worked to bring new life into the world. Martha held her hand, wiping her brow and murmuring encouragement, while the experienced midwife directed the process with calm efficiency. As the first light of dawn touched the eastern horizon, a robust cry announced the arrival of Michael John Lawson, named for Madeline's mother Michaela and her father John. The healthy baby boy had Zachary's dark hair and Madeline's determined chin. When Zachary was finally allowed inside, his hands trembling as he approached the bed where Madeline cradled their son, the expression on his face was one she would remember until her dying day. Awe, love, and gratitude so profound, it transcended ordinary emotion. "He's perfect," Zachary whispered, carefully touching the tiny fingers that instinctively curled around his much larger one. Just like his mother, watching her husband and son together in those first precious moments, Madeline reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place. The road had been difficult at times, marked by pain and loss, but it had led to a joy more complete than she had ever imagined possible. In the years that followed, the Lawson family grew and thrived. Michael was joined by a sister, Sarah Martha, 2 years later, and eventually by another brother, David Cooper, completing their family. The school expanded to include a small library, funded in part by Harold Blackwell's former bank, after new ownership took over following his conviction for the suspicious deaths of his previous wives. Martha married Thomas Reed, blending their families and building a home nearby where Madeline and Zachary's children were always welcome. John Cooper became a devoted grandfather, finding redemption in his relationships with his grandchildren and healing the wounds of the past through his renewed connection with his daughter. And at the center of it all were Zachary and Madeline, their love deepening with each passing season, each challenge overcome, each joy shared. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they stood together on the porch of the expanded ranch house that had grown along with their family, Zachary pulled Madeline close. "You ever think about that day on the road?" he asked, echoing a question she had posed on their wedding night. "How different our lives might have been." Madeline leaned into his embrace, watching their children playing in the yard with their cousins, the school in the distance where they both still taught, the thriving ranch that supported not just their family but contributed to the growing community around them. "I used to," she admitted. "But not anymore. Now I just feel grateful for every step of the journey, even the painful ones, because they all led me here, to you, to our children, to this life we've built together." Zachary kissed her then, with the same tenderness he had shown on that first day when he offered his horse to a bruised and frightened woman on a dusty Colorado road. In that kiss was the history they had written together and the promise of chapters yet to come, a love story that had begun with a simple act of kindness and had grown into a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. "I love you, Madeline Lawson," he murmured against her lips. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the days we're granted together." "And I love you, Zachary Lawson," she replied, her heart as full as it had ever been, "for offering me not just your horse that day, but your hand, your heart, and a place to call home." Above them, the Colorado sky stretched endless and blue, witness to their journey and the love that had transformed two solitary souls into a family, proof that even in the wild and sometimes harsh landscape of the West, love could take root, flourish, and change the course of lives forever.